Welcome to Health 2660. Here we don't just talk about health, we tell the stories that heal. Now please listen to the story. I used to smile without a second thought. It was as natural as breathing, as automatic as blinking. My smile was a silent greeting, a quiet expression of joy, a subtle bridge to connect with the world around me. I never scrutinized it, never questioned its authenticity, never considered its fragility. It was simply there, part of me, as familiar and reliable as my own heartbeat. Then one day, everything changed. I noticed something, a subtle shift, a barely perceptible alteration in the landscape of my mouth. My gums were receding. It wasn't a dramatic overnight transformation, but a gradual creeping retreat, a silent erosion of the pink tissue that cradled my teeth. At first, I dismissed it as a trick of the light, a fleeting illusion. But the feeling persisted, a nagging unease that grew with each passing day. I ran my tongue over my teeth, a habit I had never consciously developed, and noticed something else. They didn't feel as smooth as they used to. The once familiar slick surface now had a faint roughness, a subtle texture that hinted at something amiss. It was like running my hand over a perfectly polished stone that had begun to weather, to show the first signs of age and decay. And no matter how carefully I brushed, that rough, gritty feeling never quite went away. I doubled my efforts meticulously, cleaning every nook and cranny, scrubbing with a fervor that bordered on obsession. But the grittiness remained an unwelcome guest that refused to depart. My breath started to smell different, too. It wasn't a foul, overpowering stench, but a subtle, unpleasant odor, a faint hint of decay that lingered in the back of my throat. I tried mints, mouthwashes, even those tongue scrapers that promised to banish bad breath forever, but nothing seemed to work. The smell persisted, a constant reminder that something was not right. I thought maybe I was just getting older. Perhaps this was simply the inevitable consequence of time, the natural wear and tear of a life lived. Maybe my gums were destined to recede, my teeth destined to become rough, my breath destined to betray me. I tried to resign myself to this fate, to accept it as a part of the aging process, until my dentist told me something that left me terrified. The words hung in the air, heavy and ominous, casting a dark shadow over my otherwise bright and cheerful dental office. If this kept going, I could start losing my teeth. The thought sent a shiver down my spine, a primal fear that resonated deep within my bones. Losing my teeth. The very idea was horrifying, a nightmare scenario that I had never even considered. My teeth were more than just tools for chewing. They were a part of my identity, a key component of my smile, a symbol of my youth and vitality. The growing fear. The word tartar kept coming up. My dentist repeated it several times, emphasizing its importance, explaining its insidious nature. He pointed to the white, chalky deposits that clung to my teeth, particularly along the gum line. He described it as hardened plaque, a calcified fortress of bacteria that resisted even the most vigorous brushing. Dental plaque. He spoke of it in hushed tones, as if it were a malevolent entity, a silent predator lurking in the shadows of my mouth. He explained that plaque was a sticky film of bacteria that constantly formed on teeth, feeding on sugars and carbohydrates, producing acids that eroded enamel. He warned me that if left unchecked, plaque could lead to cavities, gum disease, and eventually tooth loss. He called it biofilm. He used the term with a certain reverence, as if it held the key to understanding the complexities of oral health. He explained that biofilm was more than just plaque. It was a complex community of microorganisms, a thriving ecosystem of bacteria, fungi, and viruses all working together to colonize the surfaces of my teeth. At first, I didn't really understand. I was overwhelmed by the jargon, confused by the scientific explanations. I brushed, I flossed, I even used expensive mouthwashes. I followed all the instructions, adhered to all the recommendations, and yet the problem persisted. It felt like I was fighting a losing battle, a Sisyphean task, of endlessly pushing a boulder uphill, only to have it roll back down again. But no matter what I did, the tartar kept building up. It was like a persistent weed in a garden, stubbornly reappearing, despite my best efforts to eradicate it. I tried different toothpastes, different toothbrushes, different flossing techniques. I even invested in a fancy electric toothbrush that promised to remove plaque with superior efficiency. But the tartar remained a constant source of frustration and despair. At every dental visit, they scraped and cleaned, using those sharp metal instruments that always made me cringe. The hygienist would meticulously remove the tartar, chipping away at the hardened deposits, polishing my teeth until they gleamed. But it always came back. It was like painting over a rusty surface. The rust might be temporarily concealed, but it would inevitably reappear stronger and more persistent than before. And every time they scraped, my gums bled a little more. The bleeding was a constant reminder of the damage being done, a visual representation of the inflammation and irritation that plagued my gums. It was a vicious cycle. The tartar caused inflammation. The inflammation caused bleeding, and the bleeding made it even harder to remove the tartar. I started to wonder, is this just how it goes? Was I doomed to slowly watch my teeth fail? Was this the inevitable fate of aging, a gradual decline that I was powerless to prevent? I felt a sense of resignation creeping in, a feeling of helplessness that threatened to consume me. One evening, frustrated and desperate, I sat at my kitchen table, scrolling through health articles. The glow of the computer screen illuminated my face, casting long shadows across the room. I had spent hours searching for answers, poring over countless websites, blogs, and forums, desperately seeking a solution to my dental woes. That's when I stumbled across something I had never heard before: the real nature of biofilms. The article was dense and technical, filled with scientific jargon and complex diagrams. But as I persevered, I began to grasp the underlying concepts, the hidden truths about the microbial world that thrived within my mouth. I learned that biofilms aren't just plaque. They're tiny cities built by bacteria. The article described biofilms as highly organized communities of microorganisms, complex ecosystems that functioned much like miniature cities. The bacteria within these biofilms communicated with each other, shared resources, and worked together to defend themselves against external threats. The bacteria hide beneath a protective dome of calcium, making them almost invisible to my immune system and resistant to antibiotics. This was the key to understanding why my regular dental care wasn't enough. The bacteria were protected by a shield of calcium, a fortress that rendered them virtually impervious to my immune system and resistant to the effects of antibiotics. It was like trying to attack a city that was completely shielded by impenetrable walls. I read that 95% of bacteria in nature live in biofilms. The realization was staggering. I had always thought of bacteria as solitary organisms floating freely in the environment. But the vast majority of bacteria lived in these complex, organized communities, these thriving biofilms that were far more resilient and adaptable than their solitary counterparts. Even that slimy layer on rocks in a stream that's biofilm. The article used this example to illustrate the ubiquity of biofilms in the natural world. They were everywhere, from the surfaces of rocks in streams to the insides of pipes in industrial facilities. And inside my mouth, it was no different. My mouth was a microcosm of the natural world, a thriving ecosystem of bacteria that had formed a complex biofilm on the surfaces of my teeth. Every time I ate sugar, I was feeding these bacteria. The connection was suddenly clear. Sugar was the fuel that powered the biofilm, the food that allowed the bacteria to thrive and multiply. They thrived producing acids that slowly weakened my teeth, pulling calcium right out of them. The bacteria were essentially stealing calcium from my teeth, weakening the enamel and making them more susceptible to decay. It was like a slow, insidious form of sabotage, a gradual erosion of my dental health from within. Worse yet, these bacteria were using that very calcium to build even stronger biofilm shelters. The realization was horrifying. The bacteria were not only stealing calcium from my teeth, but they were also using that calcium to build even stronger defenses, to create even more impenetrable fortresses. It was a self-perpetuating cycle of destruction, a downward spiral that seemed impossible to escape. It suddenly made sense why my regular dental care wasn't enough. I wasn't just battling plaque. I was fighting a deeply rooted bacterial fortress. My regular brushing and flossing were merely scratching the surface, failing to penetrate the protective shield of the biofilm and address the underlying bacterial colonies. I was like a soldier, trying to attack a fortified city with nothing but a toothbrush. That's when I discovered a simple remedy. The article mentioned a few natural remedies that had shown promise in disrupting biofilms and promoting oral health. I was skeptical at first, but I was also desperate. I had nothing to lose by trying. A mixture I could make at home. The remedy was surprisingly simple, requiring only a few common household ingredients. 3 simple ingredients. Nothing fancy. No expensive products. No complicated procedures. Just baking soda, hydrogen peroxide, and water. The ingredients were readily available and inexpensive, a stark contrast to the expensive dental products that had failed to deliver results. Here's what I learned. Baking soda, or sodium bicarbonate, helps neutralize the acid produced by bacteria. The article explained the chemistry behind the remedy, detailing how each ingredient worked to combat the biofilm. When the pH in the mouth drops too low, between 3.5 and 5.5, calcium starts leaching from the teeth. This was the key to understanding the destructive power of the biofilm. The acids produced by the bacteria lowered the pH in the mouth, creating an environment that dissolved tooth enamel and allowed calcium to leach out. Baking soda helps raise the pH, stopping this destructive process. By neutralizing the acids, baking soda helped to restore the pH balance in the mouth, preventing further damage to the teeth. It also weakens the biofilms, making it easier for bacteria to be washed away. The baking soda acted as a gentle abrasive, disrupting the structure of the biofilm and making it easier for the bacteria to be dislodged and washed away. And surprisingly, hydrogen peroxide is something my own body already produces in small amounts right in my saliva. This was a comforting thought, the idea that I was simply augmenting a natural process that was already occurring within my body. At 3% concentration, hydrogen peroxide helps break down biofilms, kill bacteria, and even fight yeast like Candida that also hide in these biofilms. The hydrogen peroxide acted as a powerful disinfectant, killing the bacteria within the biofilm and preventing them from multiplying. It also helped to break down the biofilm matrix, making it easier for the bacteria to be washed away. The mixture was incredibly simple. A quarter teaspoon of baking soda, a quarter teaspoon of 3% hydrogen peroxide. Mix it into half a cup of water. The recipe was straightforward and easy to follow, requiring only a few basic measurements and simple mixing instructions. After brushing my teeth with toothpaste as usual, I would dip my toothbrush into this solution and gently brush again. I incorporated the remedy into my daily oral hygiene routine, using it as a supplement to my regular brushing and flossing. Sometimes I even used it as a light mouth rinse for about 30 seconds. This allowed the solution to reach all areas of my mouth, further disrupting the biofilm and killing bacteria. At first, I didn't expect much. I had tried so many different remedies and products that had failed to deliver results. I was prepared for disappointment. But after a few weeks, I began to feel it. The changes were subtle at first, but they were undeniable. My teeth felt smoother. The gritty texture was fading. The rough, sandpaper-like feeling that had plagued my teeth for so long began to disappear, replaced by a smooth, clean sensation. My gums bled less. The bleeding was gradually diminishing, a sign that the inflammation was subsiding, and the tissues were healing. The bad breath, gone. The unpleasant odor that had lingered in the back of my throat vanished, replaced by a clean, fresh scent. And my next dental cleaning. The moment of truth. I braced myself for the usual lecture about tartar buildup and gum inflammation. The hygienist actually paused and looked surprised. Her eyes widened as she examined my teeth, her expression shifting from concern to amazement. "Whatever you're doing," she said, "keep doing it." Her words were music to my ears. They were validation that my efforts were paying off, that I had finally found a solution that worked. An extra layer of protection. After about 2 months of consistently following the routine, I decided to add vitamin K2 to my daily regimen. I had learned that K2 acts like a traffic director, guiding calcium to the right places, into the bones and teeth, instead of letting it build up where it doesn't belong, like dental plaque or artery walls. I had stumbled upon some research suggesting that vitamin K2 played a crucial role in calcium metabolism, helping to ensure that calcium was deposited in the bones and teeth where it was needed, rather than accumulating in soft tissues and contributing to plaque buildup. It felt like giving my body the tools it needed to truly protect my teeth from the inside out. I was no longer just fighting the biofilm on the surface of my teeth. I was also addressing the underlying imbalances that contributed to its formation. Looking back, I realized something powerful. The realization was profound and transformative. So many of us think that keeping our teeth healthy is only about brushing and flossing. We focus on the external cleaning, the superficial removal of plaque and debris. But that's only half the battle. The real fight is microscopic, inside the biofilms, inside the acids, inside the calcium shifts, happening right beneath the surface. The true battleground was not on the surface of my teeth, but within the microscopic world of the biofilm, where bacteria thrived and acids eroded enamel. By restoring balance, neutralizing acids, and giving my body the nutrients it needs, I had found a way to reclaim my dental health. I had discovered a holistic approach to oral health, one that addressed the root causes of the problem and empowered my body to heal itself. It was more than just a remedy. It was a revelation. Health 2660. Thanks you for listening. We'll see you in the next video, and until then, be kind to yourself.